Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollands High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Alright, so once you get this from Dropbox, it's going to be kind of bright, and I want to darken this down a bit. And you'll see in Maya 2016, everything is kind of really gray themed. Even in the new Photoshop 2016, everything is this dark, really I don't know, really dark gray is what it is. When you're working with things that are bright against dark gray, it can hurt your eyes, or when you're trying to mess with UVs, since they show up white, you won't be able to see it on this. So I want to get rid of a lot of the bright white that's here. There's a few ways you can do that. You can put a filter over it to make it darker. You can adjust your brightness contrast. You can adjust your levels. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click up here. Make sure you have your magic wand tool selected. If the magic wand is not visible, just kind of hold down. It's usually just below the lasso tool there, and grab magic wand. I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold shift and then click all these open spots. Even this little bottom one down here. I'm going to avoid these green lines. I want those to stay. And see if I can get all these. All right. I'm not too concerned with the actual vase or vase being white. Some folks are more picky. I'm not going to be that picky. I'm going to go up to image, and let's see. Let me do levels. I'm going to bring my levels tab up, and I'm going to pull up one of my tabs here and see what I get. Alright, I'll go the other way. There we go. You can see how I missed this little spot right here. So I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to hold shift, click in there. Let's jump back in levels. Bring this down. I don't want to go too dark, but I do want it to be dark enough so there's enough contrast between what I'm modeling with and whatever else is there. And that's probably going to be fine. I'm going to keep my guidelines pretty bright. I'm going to hit OK. And just click off. And I will say File and Save. Alright. I'm going to jump into Maya real quick. And if you have anything in here, you can go ahead and delete it. I'm just going to delete this piece. I'm not worried about that. We're going to set up our initial grid and image planes. So we're going to be modeling, for the most part, going into Unreal. Everything inside of Unreal is measured with one grid unit being a centimeter. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we're modeling in Maya that everything is set up the same way. So first thing, let's go to Window. And I'm going to come down to Settings and Preferences. And then Settings. Then right here under Working Units, you'll see it's set to centimeters, degrees, and then for film it's 24 frames per second. We're not going to worry about this too much, but just make sure everything's where it goes. If you ever wanted to change these, they're right here, but we want it centimeters. And then you're going to save that. Alright. Now for the grid, you can come up to Display. Grid, hit the little box here that'll bring up your grid options. And you'll see that mine are set to 512. So my grid length and width is 512 by 512. You can work with a larger grid. I usually don't. A lot of folks when they work in Unreal usually set a grid to 1,000 units. And I'll show you what that looks like. So there's a grid to 1,000 units. If you're making really big things, fantastic. I don't see a need to have a grid that size. So I'm going to do 512. And I'm putting a grid line every 512 units. So what that's going to do is every 512 is going to put a a larger line every 512. And then my subdivisions, that's how many of these little squares there are. I'm going to put that at 32 units. So every 32 units, or every 32 centimeters, we will have one of these lines. And the reason I'm setting it up for 32 is in Unreal, on average, a person is about 32 to 36 units wide, and they're about 96 units tall. So I want my objects to be relative to the size of people inside of the engine. It's easier to measure that way because we can all picture roughly the size of a person in our head. So that's a good working unit. So 32, you can set your grids and guide axes and colors however you like. This is what mine is at home. Let's say if I were to bump this up and hit apply, you can see how the colors change. Let's say if I went like fantastic red. Oh, let me drop this down. I'm going to say so we're doing 512, and I have one every 32. I'll say every 100. Let's see what it looks like every 96 units, and I'll apply. So if you wanted, you could have every so many blocks a different color, so on and so forth. Let me get this. I'll make this a darker gray. And some folks like working with this. So if you look at the grid the way it is, every 96 units is mapped out. So if you wanted the size of a person's height, this would be it. Of course, this is on the floor here, but whichever. And I hit apply. Cool, that'll work. And I'm going to close. You don't have to have your grid perfectly like mine, but this is the way I'm going to have my grid for this particular demo. Now I'm going to bring in image planes. We went over a little bit in class about how to set up an image plane. There are a few different ways. You can hit view on your viewport here and come down to image plane, and you can import an image plane and it'll drop it into your viewport, but I find that they're not as easy to work with if you do it this way. And then it just causes all sorts of problems. You have to adjust the camera and the clipping plane, and they're usually just in the way. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to create a polygon primitive plane. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop it in the center here. Now if I zoom in, now yours is probably in the center by default, hopefully mine, well, you can see that mine did not. I'm just going to go over to my translations here and just hit everything to 0. And under my control panel, or sorry, my channel box, I'm going to go ahead and name this image plane front. And then right here under inputs, I'm going to make this, let's see, Photoshop. If I go up to image and I go down to image size, this is in inches. I mean, I could put it in centimeters. Let's see. So every 36 centimeters, so it's 36 centimeters across, 18 centimeters high. So let me see how that's going to work. I'm going to cut this number in half for the width because I want only half of this. Let's see how this looks here. Let's make it 18 centimeters by 18 centimeters square. Sure. That'll work. 18 by 18. And then for our subdivisions on this guy, in Maya 2016, these pop in by default. I think they have 10 subdivisions. I'm going to make sure they have 1. We don't need to have a lot of subdivisions on these, or just image planes. Now I'm going to load in the actual color. So up on your shelf here, grab the rendering tab and just drop in a Lambert. The reason I'm picking a Lambert shader is I don't want it to be reflective. I want to try to work with these without any lighting or distortion kind of being in the way. Once this is loaded up, I'm going to name this image plane. And then under color, I'm going to hit the checker box. It's going to bring up our file menu. So file, click the folder. Now I have a game design folder on my desktop, so I usually just go straight to there, and inside of there I have reference images. And inside here I need my, where did I put you? Model sheet for Vase. There it is. Let's go ahead and hit open. You'll see it pop up here. Alright, once we have our Vase loaded up and ready, we can adjust the UVs on this. Now when you first load this in, it's not going to show up quite the way we're expecting. So go ahead and select your object and press 6 on the keyboard. That'll bring up the image, and you can see it right there. And it doesn't look too bad. It's pretty. And you have the one side and the other side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to divide this into 2 separate image planes, where we get the, if I jump back into Photoshop, we'll get this kind of wide vase kind of outline here. Now if you want a skinny one, you can always make a skinny one, but we're going to do the wide one. So the first thing we need to do is we want to make sure that our UVs, remember that's our 2D texture coordinates, we want to make sure that those are projected correctly. It looks like they are here. By default, if you drop in a cube or a sphere or whichever, it'll have some default UVs lined up on it. But we're going to be changing some things. So let's make sure. You guys are in Maya 2016, so you will not see this particular menu. When you click on UVs, up on the top here, for you guys, you will see just a single, see me, I'm on Maya 2011. Maya 2016 will have a single UV tab, and under there, both of these options will be there. And inside UVs, you'll see an option for planar, cylindrical, and spherical. And you want to click on planar. Make sure you get the little box at the corner here. This will bring up the options. And you just want to make sure that you're going to take a picture of your UVs projected from the y-axis. Remember, y is from the top down. So in 2D space, as far as this thing is concerned, this would be the top piece, right? So we want the projection to be in our y-axis. Go ahead and hit it, and you'll see this little outline kind of appear. This shows that it did, in fact, set our UVs. And then we're going to click our UV tab. Again, you guys will only have one UV tab. I'm going to go ahead and close this window. So click on your UV tab, and for you guys up at the top right here, it's going to say UV editor. For me, it's down at the bottom, so don't freak out. Now, what opens up is our UV editor, and you probably will not see your object selected. If you do, fantastic. If you don't worry. We will just move this window aside. Make sure that we are back in object mode by pushing F8 and selecting our object, and it should show up. Alright, so inside of our UV editor here, you have these little quadrants. Over here is our positive coordinates. Down here is just kind of useless. Nothing ever really goes over here, so ignore most of that. Alright, so you can see the outline around my object, or around my texture, I should say, is white. If we left this background as white, we wouldn't be able to see this. That's why I went ahead and darkened it up. What we want to do is we want to cut this UV grid kind of in half. And you can see right now, this white line outlines the UV positions. And this occupies the whole space of this object. We only want half that space. So I'm going to press F12 on the keyboard to bring up UVs, and this will let us edit our UVs. Alternatively, you can right-click and just go to UVs. And then I'm going to marquee select. So what that means is I'm going to click and drag so I have a selection box. I'm going to grab both of my right corners. And you'll see you have little green dots right there. If I push W on the keyboard, it brings up the Move tool. And I'm going to hold X, and that's going to let me snap this to the grid so I can just very precisely move this down to the center line. See that? So this is exactly in the middle. I'm going to move this aside, and you'll see that we have our nice, plump little vase there. Okay. Let me shrink this window down because it's taking up a lot of space. Alright, so that's image plane number 1. I'm going to right click and go to object mode, or you can press F8 on the keyboard. Alright, once I have this selected, I'm going to set this up on my grid. So over here in channel box, I'm going to give it a couple clicks, and I have my image plane front. I'm going to rotate this by hitting the E key. I'm going to grab this x-axis, and I'm going to pull it so it rotates in the x 90 degrees. Yours might not snap nice and smooth like this. If it doesn't, don't worry. You can just come over here and just type in 90 and it'll snap up nice and pretty. Alright. Later on I'll show everybody in the class how to set this so you can kind of get that snapping rotation. But we're not going to do that right now. Now I'm going to grab this object, make sure I have my translation tool, so W, and I'm going to just hold X and just move this back about like so. That should get me, how far out am I? I want to get to this grid space here. There you go, minus 96. That'll work fantastic. And now I want this guy to be up on the grid. So we can do one of two things. Remember when we set our presets, our object was, what we say, 18 units high. So we can come over here to our translate Y, and we can say 9 units, which is half of 18, in the positive, and it'll push it up on the grid, so it's right there. See that? That'll work. And now I want to copy this. So with our object selected, I'm going to hold down Control and press D on the keyboard. And then I will just go ahead and drag this one off. So now this is copied. Go ahead and change its name from image plane front to image plane side. And I will go ahead and rotate along the y-axis, 90 degrees. Again, for the snapping, just come over here to rotate, make sure that's 90. And then I will translate this so that it is 0 in the x-axis, 0 z. Put that back at origin. And now I'm going to move this so that it is going to be 96 so we should have a minus 96 in the x. That way we can see both of these planes clearly without much distortion. Now with our second plane selected, we'll jump back into our UV editor. Remember, your editor will be under UVs at the top. And all I want to do is I want to move this section of UVs over to the other image. So F12 on the keyboard to bring up UVs. Press W, and I'm going to marquee select this whole thing. Okay, so that I get all 4 of them. I'm going to hold X. Actually, scratch that. The reason I don't want to hold X and move this is if I do, everything's going to... it's not toggling quite the way I wanted it to. I was actually expecting it to collapse. There it goes. So I don't want the collapse. I'm going to grab these two. I'm going to move those to the end. Grab these two. Move them to the middle. There we go. So now we should have both sides there. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now we will start box modeling. Alright, from right here, go ahead and... Actually, no, we have one more step. Let's go back into object mode. I want to make it so that when we're modeling, we don't accidentally grab our planes. Okay? So with both of our planes selected, you can do two things. You can marquee select, which is draw a selection box around both planes. Or you can click on one, hold down Shift, click the other. So that both of them are selected. We're going to come over to our channel box where it says Display. And under Layers, we're going to create Layer from Selected. Okay, it's going to say Layer 1, and I'm just going to name this Image Plane. You can give it a color if you want. I'm just going to leave it without a color. And I'm going to save. Okay, so it has two buttons. You have a V for visible. That toggles its visibility. So now we can tell that they are both on this. And then right here is how it's going to be rendered. So we want this to be R for reference. So right now it's under rendered R for reference. And what that means is I can't accidentally click on these guys. They are hidden as far as our mouse is concerned, but they are visible so we can edit them. If you ever want to modify them, you can always come back and just drop it back to normal, and it will be clickable. On Maya 2016, I think these are, this blank one actually has a name now. But you have your outline and your reference. Okay. Go ahead and save it from here. So File, Save As, and I'm going to save this last name underscore Vase. So for me, that's going to be there we go. Okay, and I will catch you up in the next video to start up box modeling.